Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I have very interesting story for you. Don't forget like and subscribe. Now enjoy the story.
The morning I heard my daughter-in-law tell my son that his father was losing his mind, I was standing 12 feet away in the hallway, holding a cup of chamomile tea, completely lucid, and wearing both of my slippers on the correct feet. I remember that last detail because I checked, not because I was confused, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain that nothing about me, in that moment, could be misread. I was 71 years old. I had spent 34 years as a structural engineer. I had once calculated load tolerances for a bridge that still stood. I was not senile, but Priya did not know I was listening, and so she kept talking. "Gets confused, Marcus," she said. Her voice was patient and careful, the kind of voice people use when they're constructing something rather than simply speaking. "Yesterday he left the stove on. He called me by the wrong name twice. I'm worried about him being here with the kids." She paused. "I think we need to have a real conversation about what's next." My son said nothing for a long moment. I stood very still in the hallway, the tea growing cold in my hands. "He's fine," Marcus finally said, but his voice had that particular flatness that meant he wasn't sure. I turned quietly and went back to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed I'd slept in for 31 years, in the same house my wife Alina and I had bought when Marcus was 4 years old, and I thought about what I had just heard. The stove, my name confusion. I ran through the previous day in my mind the way I used to run structural calculations, methodically, without sentiment. I had turned the stove off. I had confirmed it twice before leaving the kitchen, a habit Alina had instilled in me decades ago after a close call with a forgotten kettle. And Priya's name, I had called her dear at breakfast, the same thing I called Alina every morning for 38 years. It was reflex, it was grief, it was not dementia, but I understood what she was doing. I had understood it for months. Priya had married Marcus 6 years ago, and for the first 2 years, I had genuinely liked her. She was smart, organized, and clearly loved my son. When Alina died, quietly, in October, of a heart that had simply decided it was finished, Priya had been kind. She had handled the caterers for the reception, kept Marcus from falling apart completely, sent me a card every few weeks for the first year with small notes inside. I had been grateful, but something shifted when Marcus got his promotion. He was now a regional director at a logistics firm, which meant a larger salary, which meant, in Priya's mind, it seemed, a larger life. She began talking about upgrading to a bigger house in a better neighborhood. She began talking about private school for the grandchildren. She began talking very carefully and very often about the estate in ways that made the word feel less like a legal concept and more like a destination she was trying to reach before I did. The house was the issue. Alina and I had paid it off entirely in 2009. It was worth considerably more now than it had been then. Real estate in this part of the city had a way of compounding without anyone's permission. It was the primary asset in my estate, and Marcus was my only child, and Priya was very good at arithmetic. I had never hidden any of this from Marcus. He knew what the house was worth. He knew what my savings looked like. He was a good man, my son, earnest, sometimes slow to see things clearly, but fundamentally decent. The trouble was that he loved his wife, and loving someone often means borrowing their vision of the world. The senile comment was not the first attempt. There had been smaller ones, a quiet word to Marcus about whether I should still be driving, at his age with his reflexes, a suggestion that perhaps a senior community would give me more social opportunities, a remark at Christmas dinner made lightly about how confusing it must be to manage a house alone. Each one individually was reasonable. Cumulatively, they were a blueprint. After the hallway conversation, I called my attorney. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I had been in the garden, something I did every day now, because Alina had planted those roses and I had promised her, without ever actually saying the words, that I would keep them alive. Priya had come outside, ostensibly to bring me a glass of water. She walked across the flagstone path toward me, and I noticed, even at the time, that she was wearing her good shoes, not the garden clogs she usually wore on the patio, but her leather flats with the smooth soles. She slipped on the flagstone, or rather, she fell on the flagstone. Whether those are the same thing is a question I have had a great deal of time to consider. She went down hard on her left side, crying out sharply, and I moved toward her immediately, dropping my trowel. I helped her sit up. I asked if she was all right. She was clutching her wrist, her face twisted in pain that looked genuine enough. I helped her inside. I got ice. I offered to call Marcus. She said she was fine. She called Marcus herself 20 minutes later while I was washing my hands at the kitchen sink. I did not hear that conversation, but I heard what Marcus said to me when he came home that evening, his face arranged in an expression I had never seen on him before, not quite anger, not quite pity, something worse than both. Priya says you were upset with her in the garden, that there was an argument, that she fell when she was trying to get away from you. Set down the book I had been reading. I looked at my son. I said very calmly, that did not happen. She's got a sprained wrist, Dad. Slipped on the flagstone. I helped her up. There was no argument. I paused. Marcus, look at me. He looked at me, and I could see him seeing me, really seeing me for just a moment, but then something moved behind his eyes and closed. She's not lying, he said quietly, not suggesting she is. Which was technically not entirely true. I'm telling you what happened. He left the room without another word. That night I sat at Alina's old desk and wrote down everything, the time, the shoes, the sequence of events, every word spoken. I wrote it in the precise, careful hand of a man who had once been paid to notice things that other people overlooked. Then I put the paper in an envelope and sealed it. The meeting with my attorney, Gerald Whitmore, had already taken place 10 days before the fall. I had gone in quietly, told him what I'd been observing, and asked him to walk me through my options. Gerald was 73 himself, sharp as a new nail, and he'd been handling my affairs since 1997. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I had always valued about him. What you're describing, he said when I finished, is a pattern. Whether it's intentional or not, the effect is the same. It's isolating you and establishing a narrative about your competence. I said, that's exactly what it is. There are things we can do. He folded his hands on the desk. Starting with your estate documents, we spent 90 minutes in that office. By the time I left, I had signed paperwork establishing a revocable living trust, restructured the ownership of the house, designated a healthcare proxy from outside the immediate family, Gerald himself, whom I trusted completely, and amended my will in 3 specific ways that I will not detail here, except to say that they were no longer subject to the assumptions Priya had apparently been making. I had also, on Gerald's advice, arranged for a complete cognitive evaluation at my physician's office. The results came back the following week. No impairment, no decline, superior memory function for my age group. The report was 3 pages long. I had it notarized. I gave a copy to Gerald and kept one in the desk drawer beside Elena's old reading glasses. After the fall, after that terrible conversation with Marcus, I called Gerald again. I described what had happened and what Priya had told my son. There was a pause on the line. Do you have any documentation? He asked. I wrote it down that same evening, I said. Time-stamped notes. Another pause, then, good man. 3 weeks later, Marcus asked if we could have dinner together, just the 2 of us, at the Italian place near his office where we used to go when he was in college. I said yes. I wore my good jacket. I brought the envelope. We ate for a while without saying anything of consequence. The bread was good. The wine was decent. My son looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Finally, he said, I don't know what to think, Dad. About what specifically? He looked at his glass. About all of it. About you, about Priya, about whether he started again. She says you've been confused, that the fall wasn't what you described. I want to believe you, but I also, Marcus. I said it gently, the way I used to say his name when he was young and working himself into a spiral. Open the envelope. I slid it across the table. He looked at it, then at me, then he opened it. Inside was the notarized cognitive evaluation, the notes I had written the evening of the fall, and one additional document, a letter from Gerald on firm letterhead summarizing the estate restructuring and the reason for it. It did not use Priya's name. It did not need to. My son read for a long time. The restaurant moved around us, voices, the scrape of chairs, the particular music of a Tuesday evening, and my son read, and his face did something I had not seen it do since his mother's funeral. It cracked just slightly at the edges. Dad, he said, his voice was rough. I'm not angry, I said. I want you to understand that first. I'm not angry at you. Are you? You're my son, and because I know you're not a bad man. I know you were in a difficult position. I paused, but I need you to know that I am not confused. I have not been confused. And I need you to trust me over the person who is trying to convince you otherwise, not because I'm your father, but because everything in that envelope is documented, verifiable, and true. He was quiet for a very long time. House, he finally said. The trust. Mine, I said simply, as it has always been. And it will be handled the way your mother and I always intended, when the time comes, and not a moment before. He drove me home that night. We sat in the driveway for a while, the engine ticking as it cooled, the way engines do when a journey has ended. I should have seen it, Marcus said. Not required to be perfect, I said. You're just required to do better, he nodded. He looked very much in that moment like the boy he had been, the one who used to bring me broken things from the garage and ask if I could fix them, with that specific look of hope that children have before they learn the limits of their fathers. I had always tried to fix the things he brought me. I got out of the car. I went inside. I put the kettle on. Elena's roses would bloom again in another month if I kept up with the watering. I'd made a promise, and I intended to keep it. Some structures, you see, are worth maintaining, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, but because they are yours and because you built them carefully, and because the people who tried to convince you they were already crumbling underestimated one essential thing. Engineers know how to read load-bearing walls, and I have never, in 71 years, let one fall that I wanted to keep standing.